When creating a truth table, the first thing that you need to do is determine how many unique variables you have. In this case, we have two. There's P and there's Q. Now, suppose we had not P and Q in parentheses or P. I would still have two unique variables in this case. So that's what we're looking for, is how many unique variables, and we have two. So when you have two variables, we take the number 2 to the power of the number of variables. So there's two 2's here, and the two variables is actually the exponent 2. So it's always the number 2 raised to the number of variables. So this is 2 to the number of variables. That's 2 to the 2. Kind of doing this backwards here, but that equals 4. And that tells me the number of rows. So that means that we should have 4 rows in our truth table. All right, so let's construct our truth table. Now, this is a very particular procedure. I guess I'm going to describe it that way, where I have, let's see, I think I can do this a little neater. Here we go. All right, so we have P and Q. I like to just separate them from the rest of the expressions with a vertical line, and that's really just my own personal preference. You can put a vertical line in between every expression or not at all. So it's really a personal choice thing here. And let's see. Let me go ahead and start filling this in. Okay, so we have our two variables P and Q. Now, they each can be either true or false, and that's why we have 4 rows, because there's 4 different ways to combine those. So we could have P is true and Q is true, or P is true and Q is false. Or we could have P being false while Q is true, and P is false while Q is false. So all the different possible scenarios here. Now what you want to notice is that first of all, we take the P variable and we make half of the rows true and half of them false. So since we knew we were going to have 4 rows, that means 2 trues and 2 falses. Then we cut that in half. So instead of having 2 trues in a row, I just want to have 1 true and then a false, and then I do true and false again. So the last column for our unique variables should always alternate true and false. So we're going to see when we have 3 variables how that's a little different, and that'll be in the next problem. So I'm just going to wait on that for the moment. So let's clean this up, get rid of all these braces here, and now I'm ready to really get into my truth table. So we have, our expression is not P and Q. So I'm going to need a column in my truth table for each step of the problem. This is very much like doing order of operations. So the next thing to do in our order of operations is to negate the variable P. So I'm going to write not P, and I'll put a vertical line for that. Okay. So not P. Well, this is just going to have the exact opposite truth value of P. So it's going to go false, false, true, true. All right. And that's all filled in. So now the only thing that's left is to do the whole expression, which is not P and Q. All right. So I made this truth table a little bigger than it needed to be. That's all right. Kind of a lot longer too. Here we go. All right, so Now what I'm doing, and I like to mark these, especially when people are doing these for the first time, makes it a little easier. I can label my columns 1, 2, and 3 of what I've done so far. And 3 was actually the negation of column 1, right? So that's how we got column 3. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking column 3 and I'm anding it together, kind of using and as a verb now, anding it together with column 2. So when I combine the variable in column 2 with column 3, using the and, the conjunction, whenever we have true and false, or in this case it really is false and true, but it's commutative, it doesn't matter. So either way is false. If there's any false in an and statement, the whole thing is false. So next time we have false and false, well, that is false. So next we have true and true, or I really should say true and true. There we go. And that's going to be true because I don't have any false in there. So that's the only way to get true, is if there's no false at all. And then finally we have true and false, and that is false because it has some false in it. So my final answer is really this last column, where we see that if P and Q are both true, the compound statement is false. If P is true and Q is false, the compound statement is false. And if they're both false, the compound statement is false. So the only way for the compound statement to be true is if P is false and Q is true. So that's what we're doing with the truth table, is we're figuring that out. Now this was number 12. Could have labeled that before. All right, so let's go on to 14. Now in 14, let's see what we have for 14. We have P and Q and R. And notice that Q and R is in parentheses. So after I fill in my individual unique variables, I'll start with the Q and R sub-statement, I guess you could say. All right, so let's do this. So I have P, I have Q, and I have R. So 3 different variables, which means that I'm going to have 8 rows. So I better make this fairly long. Probably overdoing a little bit, but can always go back and erase. Okay, so as I said, we've got 3 unique variables. So 2 to the power of 3 rows, which is 8 rows. And we said before, let the first half of the p-values be true. So I'm going to do 4 trues in a row. True, 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 true. And then 4 falses. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now I cut that in half for the Q. So true, true, and then false, false. And again, true, true, because we have to have 8, and then false, false. And finally for R, we wind up alternating true, false, true, false, true, false, true, false. This is the standard way to fill in a truth table. So please do keep in mind when you are doing this on an exam that you do need to preserve that order of the variables. So you need the P to start with 4 trues and 4 falses, and then the Q with 2 trues and 2 falses, assuming that your variables are P, Q, and R. So now, next thing is to make a column for Q and R. All right, so now, let's see, let's make a little space. Well, let's do this better. Here we go. Just going to move that up to the side, and I can erase that. It's not really in the way anyway, but let's see. So I have column 1, column 2, and column 3, and I'm taking 2 and 3. All right, so let's keep that in mind. So 2 and 3. I have true and true, which makes true. Sorry, went on the wrong screen for a second. All right, so true and true makes true. True and false makes false. The nice thing to do, if you can, so I'm on a computer screen. I can't really do this, but let's see, can I? Oh, I think I actually can. Let's try this. Is to basically cover up what you don't want to look at the moment. So I'm going to cover up the P column. And kind of covering that up as much as I can. Here we go. Because I don't want to get confused with this. Now, if you're doing this on a piece of paper, it's a lot easier because it's in columns. Just put a pencil or a popsicle stick over it. And honestly, that's like a really good trick for this, and that way you're not looking at the wrong column, and you can easily move it around and cover up whatever it is you're not supposed to be looking at. So that just keeps your brain straight, I guess. Let's see. So we're back to doing this, and false and true is false. False and false is false. True and true is true. And what I do sometimes is just look for 2 trues, gives me a true, because I'm working with and, I'm assuming here. And then if I don't have 2 trues, then it's false. So false, false, false. So these can go a lot quicker than it really seems like. It's because I'm talking a lot that that this video is kind of long. All right, and I'm kind of not too well in alignment, but good enough. All right. And then we have the whole thing, which is P and Q and R. P and Q and R. All right, so this is column 1 and column 4 that we just made. All right, now hopefully this is going to work. That didn't work. Oh, is this it? Okay. Ah, there we go. So now we have column 1 back. And I'm going to cover up columns 2 and 3 because I'm not really looking at those, because I'm really only combining together 1 and 4. So 2 and 3 are currently irrelevant, and since this is the last one, I really don't need to ever look at them again. Okay. Ooh, I seem to have moved off my big hair. There we go. All right, so now let's see. So we've got 1 and 4. So true and true, which makes true. True and false is false. And what I'm looking for is another true and true, and I don't have any. So it's going to be false all the way down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's very badly out of alignment. But you can use lined paper, or if you're typing, it'll stay in alignment. So basically just don't do this on a big sheet of white paper with no lines is my best suggestion, which is kind of do as I say and not as I do. And wow, that's really bad. Okay. There we go. You get the idea. So we've got true and then falses for everything else for this statement. And so that's the end of how to make truth tables.